13 April 1940. Snow drifts low across the water, blurring the mountains into pale shadows. The fjord is silent, except for the slow pulse of engines echoing off frozen rock. Steel cuts through black water. At the head of the formation sails an old battleship, broad, scarred, and calm. HMS Warspite. 26 years old, veteran of another war. Her guns are already trained, not in haste, but with certainty. Ahead lies Narvik. Behind it, a maze of narrow fjords. Inside those fjords, 8 German destroyers, damaged, low on fuel, short on ammunition. Ships designed for speed, now trapped by geography and time. The air smells of oil and cold iron. Lookouts scan the shoreline, knowing torpedoes could come from anywhere. This is not open sea combat. There is no room to maneuver, no distance to hide. Warspite moves forward anyway. Slowly, deliberately. Like a closing door. Within hours, these waters will burn. Steel will tear steel apart at point-blank range. And one of the most lopsided naval hunts of the Second World War will be decided. Not by numbers, but by position, pressure, and inevitability. Behind this moment lies a chain of decisions that turned Narvik into a death trap. Why Narvik mattered and how the fjords filled with war. By the winter of 1939-1940, the war in Europe had entered an uneasy pause. On land, armies watched each other across borders. At sea, however, the conflict was already relentless and economic. Germany's war machine depended on steel, and steel depended on iron ore. Each winter, when the Baltic ports froze, Swedish iron ore was shipped west by rail to the ice-free Norwegian port of Narvik. From there, German freighters carried it south through the Norwegian Sea, past Britain's naval reach. For Berlin, Narvik was not peripheral, it was vital. Without it, armament production would choke. Britain understood this clearly. So did Germany. In early 1940, both sides quietly prepared for a confrontation in Norway. The Allies debated mining Norwegian waters. Germany chose something more decisive. On 9 April 1940, German forces launched Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Norway and Denmark. Speed and surprise were everything. Narvik, far north and lightly defended, was assigned to a flotilla of 10 German destroyers, carrying mountain troops and supplies. They arrived in darkness and snow. The Norwegian defenders were overwhelmed. Narvik fell quickly, but the success came at a price that would soon become fatal. The German destroyers had burned enormous amounts of fuel fighting heavy seas on the dash north. Their logistics plan assumed rapid resupply, tankers waiting offshore. That assumption collapsed almost immediately when British naval forces intercepted and destroyed the German supply ships. By 10 April, the destroyers at Narvik were effectively stranded. Low on fuel, short on ammunition, far from friendly bases, trapped inside a fjord system that offered cover but no escape. The Royal Navy struck first. In the early hours of 10 April 1940, 5 British destroyers under Captain Bernard Warburton-Lee raced into Fjord and surprised the Germans at anchor. It was a violent, confused fight at close range. Several German destroyers were sunk or damaged. 2 British destroyers were lost. Warburton-Lee himself was killed, earning a posthumous Victoria Cross. The First Battle of Narvik ended without a clear victor, but it changed everything. The Germans had lost their commander, Commodore Friedrich Bondt. Several destroyers were crippled. Fuel and ammunition were now critically low. Most importantly, the element of surprise was gone. What followed was a tense pause measured in hours, not days. German crews worked frantically, repairing engines, redistributing ammunition, cannibalizing damaged ships. Some destroyers could barely make headway. Others had only a handful of torpedoes left. They pulled deeper into the fjords, hopping the narrow waters would neutralize British numerical and gunnery superiority. The geography became their shield. But it was also their prison. In London, the Admiralty assessed the situation with cold clarity. The German destroyer force, one of the Kriegsmarine's most modern assets, was concentrated, damaged, and cornered. This was an opportunity that would not come again. The solution was decisive and unmistakable. Send a battleship. Not a fast one, not a modern one, but one with heavy guns, disciplined crews, and the authority to dominate confined waters. HMS Warspite was chosen. By the evening of 12 April, she was steaming north, escorted by 9 British destroyers. Her orders were simple in wording and brutal in implication: enter the fjords, find the enemy, and destroy them. As dawn approached on 13 April, the German destroyer crews waited among snow-covered mountains, listening for engines that would soon echo off every wall of stone. The hunt was about to resume on a scale Narvik had never seen. The narrowing options inside the fjords. By the night of 12 April 1940, Narvik had become a place of waiting. Snow continued to fall in thick, wind-driven sheets. Wreckage floated near the harbor. Burned-out hulks lay half-submerged along the shoreline, silent markers of the first battle. German sailors moved cautiously along the quays and rocky slopes, aware that British ships could return at any moment, but uncertain how. The destroyers that remained were scattered throughout the fjord system. Some were anchored near Narvik itself. Others had withdrawn deeper into side fjords, Fjord, Fjord, and Fjord, where steep mountains rose almost vertically from the water. In places, the channel narrowed to a few hundred meters. From a defensive standpoint, the terrain offered advantages. There was little room for a battleship to maneuver. Torpedoes could be fired from close range. Smoke could obscure approach lanes. But those advantages came with a cost. Fuel shortages meant engines could not be kept running continuously. Ammunition was so scarce that captains rationed shells by the dozen. Several destroyers had lost boilers or steering gear during the earlier fighting. Some could not exceed low speeds. Others could not reverse quickly, an unforgivable weakness in confined waters. The German crews understood the reality. If the British returned in force, escape would be impossible. Command decisions now fell to individual captains. With Bont dead and communications limited, there was no unified plan, only local improvisation. Some commanders hoped to ambush British ships as they advanced. Others planned to run their vessels aground and fight as floating batteries. A few prepared demolition charges, accepting that their ships might be lost regardless of the outcome. Across the North Sea, British planning was equally deliberate. The Admiralty did not underestimate the risk of sending a battleship into a fjord. Narrow waters neutralized speed and made large ships vulnerable to torpedoes, but intelligence reports were clear. The German destroyers were damaged, short of fuel, and lacked coordinated command. The risk was real, but so was the opportunity. HMS Warspite was not chosen for speed. She was chosen for stability, firepower, and experience. Laid down before the First World War, Warspite had already seen more combat than most ships afloat. Her crew was seasoned, her gunnery was precise, and crucially, she carried 15-inch guns, weapons that could reach into fjords and obliterate destroyers with a single hit. She would not go alone. 9 British destroyers were assigned to screen her, probe ahead, and pursue targets into side fjords where Warspite could not safely follow. Their role was aggressive and dangerous, close-quarter fighting in waters ideal for ambush. Just after dawn on 13 April 1940, Warspite slowed at the entrance to Fjord. Snow and low cloud reduced visibility. Mountains closed in on both sides. The water ahead looked calm, almost peaceful. Then her catapult crew went to work. A fiery swordfish biplane was launched from Warspite's deck, climbing slowly into the grey sky. Its task was reconnaissance, spotting enemy ships hidden in the fjords. Minutes later, the aircraft sighted a German submarine, U-64, lying near Björkvik. The swordfish attacked immediately. Depth charges exploded in the water. The submarine broke apart. U-64 sank, the first U-boat destroyed by an aircraft launched from a battleship. The message was unmistakable. The British were already inside the kill zone. As Warspite advanced, German lookouts finally heard what they had feared through the night, the low, steady thunder of heavy engines echoing off the fjord walls. Smoke appeared on the horizon. Signals were sent. Crews ran to battle stations. There would be no surprise this time. No confusion about intent. This would be a deliberate, methodical destruction. The stage was set. The forces were committed. And the fjords of Narvik were about to become a funnel of fire. From this point on, the battle would no longer be decided by strategy, but by angles, choices, and seconds. For the German sailors inside the fjords, the waiting was often worse than the fighting. Many had not slept since the first battle. Wounds were treated with limited supplies. Cold seeped through steel decks and soaked uniforms. Some men wrote brief notes and tucked them into pockets, not letters to be sent, but thoughts left behind in case their ships did not survive. They understood what was coming. The sound of Warspite's engines carried far in the narrow fjords, amplified by the mountains. Each echo felt closer than the last. The destroyers' crews were young, many in their early 20s, and trained for fast, aggressive action in open water. Now they faced the opposite: restricted movement, limited ammunition, and an enemy whose guns outweighed theirs many times over. On the British ships, tension took a different form. Warspite's crew had confidence, but not complacency. They knew the danger of torpedoes in confined waters. Lookouts scanned constantly. Gun crews waited in silence beside shells weighing nearly a ton. The destroyer crews ahead of the battleship understood their role clearly. They would take the first risks. This was not a clash of equals, but it was a clash of resolve. Narvik's fjord system was never meant for battleship warfare. Steep rock walls limited lines of sight. Radar was primitive. Smoke lingered and reflected sound unpredictably. Engagements would happen at close range, often with only seconds to react. For the Germans, the fjords offered ambush positions. Destroyers could hide behind headlands, fire torpedoes, then retreat deeper into narrow inlets. Shore-based troops could add rifle and machine gun fire. For the British, the same geography demanded discipline. Warspite advanced slowly, guns trained forward, destroyers fanning out ahead and to the flanks. The plan was not speed, but pressure. Push forward, deny escape, force the enemy to choose between fighting or scuttling. Every turn in the fjord reduced options. The water itself became a funnel, guiding both sides toward an inevitable collision. Leadership at Narvik was fragmented and improvised. On the German side, the loss of Commodore Bont meant there was no central command directing the destroyers. Captains acted independently, making decisions based on local conditions and incomplete information. Some coordinated briefly by signal lamp or messenger. Most did not. British leadership, by contrast, was centralized but flexible. Warspite's captain maintained overall control, while destroyer flotilla leaders were given latitude to pursue and engage targets aggressively. The objective was clear: destruction of the enemy force. There was no expectation of withdrawal. No contingency for failure. Every British order pointed forward. And as the ships closed distance, leadership would no longer be measured in plans, but in seconds under fire. These human, tactical, and command pressures now converged in the narrow water ahead, where technology and desperation would soon decide the battle's shape. Technology, enemy reality, and the moral weight of annihilation. HMS Warspite was not a modern ship by 1940 standards. But in the fjords, her age did not matter. Her 15-inch guns were designed to smash armored cruisers at long range. Against destroyers, thin-skinned, lightly protected, they were catastrophic. A single shell hit could tear a ship in half. Even near misses could cripple hulls with shockwaves alone. Warspite also brought something just as important: control. Her gunnery was deliberate, adjusted by spotting reports and disciplined fire orders. She did not need speed, she needed angles and time. German destroyers relied on torpedoes as their equalizer. In theory, a single hit could sink a battleship. In practice, fuel shortages limited maneuvering, and many torpedoes had already been expended during earlier fighting. Reloads were slow, missed shots could not be replaced. Technology favored the side that could stay calm the longest. Despite their situation, the German destroyers were not passive victims. Crews prepared ambushes. Ships were positioned bow first toward narrow channels to fire torpedoes head-on. Ammunition was redistributed so at least some vessels could fight at full strength. When retreat was impossible, captains prepared to beach their ships and continue the fight from shore. Morale varied from ship to ship. Some crews believed they could still damage or even sink the British battleship. Others accepted that survival now meant abandoning their vessels. What united them was certainty. They would not escape intact. This was no longer about victory. It was about resistance. From the British perspective, the coming battle was not about honor or revenge. It was about removing a threat. German destroyers were among the Kriegsmarine's most valuable assets, fast, modern, and difficult to replace. Destroying them here would weaken Germany's naval reach far beyond Norway. But annihilation carried moral weight. This would be close-range killing. Crews would watch enemy ships burn and sink in confined waters with little chance of rescue. British commanders understood this and proceeded anyway. War at sea left little room for hesitation. As Warspite's formation pressed deeper into the fjords, these technological, enemy, and moral realities merged into a single narrowing corridor of choice. The time for analysis had passed. Ahead lay contact, then fire, then the moment when the battle would tip from pursuit into destruction. The turning point was seconds away. 13 April 1940, the Fjord ignites. Just after mid-morning, HMS Warspite crossed the invisible line where caution ended and commitment began. Her speed was reduced deliberately, not to hesitate, but to control the fight. Ahead of her, British destroyers fanned outward, slipping past headlands and into side fjords. Smoke drifted low over the water, blurring distances and compressing time. Every echo sounded like an approaching ship. Every shadow could hide a torpedo track. The first contacts came quickly. German destroyers, alerted by the sinking of U-64, had already gone to action stations. As British ships rounded bends in the fjord, muzzle flashes burst from snow-lined shores. Torpedoes were fired at close range, white wakes cutting across dark water. The British destroyers responded instantly. Guns opened fire. Smoke screens were laid. Orders were shouted over engine noise and exploding shells. One by one, German destroyers were flushed from hiding. Some attempted to engage head-on, firing torpedoes down narrow channels where maneuver was impossible. Others turned and fled deeper into side fjords, hoping to draw the British into traps or buy time to beach their ships. Warspite followed at the center, her presence steady and oppressive. When she fired, the sound was not a crack, but a concussion. The fjord walls reflected it again and again. Observers later described the blast as physical pressure on the chest. Her shells reached targets the destroyers could not. A German ship caught in open water was struck amidships. The explosion lifted steel and flame high above the fjord surface. The destroyer slowed, then burned, drifting helplessly toward shore. British destroyers pressed the advantage. In Fjord and Fjord, German ships were cornered. With fuel exhausted and ammunition nearly gone, captains made their decisions in seconds. Some attempted final torpedo attacks. Others ordered their ships run aground, crews abandoning them under fire. Each engagement was brutal and brief. A torpedo struck a British destroyer, damaging but not sinking her. Gunfire tore through another German ship's bridge, killing officers and leaving the crew without command. Smoke thickened until visibility dropped to mere ship lengths. Above it all, Warspite advanced. She did not chase. She closed. Her guns fired methodically, selecting targets revealed by spotting reports and flashes of enemy fire. Destroyers that thought themselves hidden found shells crashing down among them seconds later. By midday, the battle had spread across multiple fjords simultaneously, isolated fights tied together by the steady pressure of the British advance. German resistance remained fierce, but coordination was gone. Each ship now fought alone. And deeper inside Fjord, the last intact destroyers waited, knowing the battleship could not easily follow them there, but also knowing there was nowhere else to go. The decisive phase was about to begin. What followed would end the destroyer force at Narvik, not in one moment, but in a series of irreversible choices made under fire. The fjords erupt in fire and steel. By early afternoon, HMS Warspite had methodically moved into position to dominate the fjord system. The British destroyers acted as both scouts and interceptors, leaving the German crews trapped in a shrinking network of channels. The first German ship to attempt escape was the Z-22 Anton Schmidt, pushing toward Fjord. Her captain fired torpedoes as she fled, but Warspite's gunnery was unerring. A single 15-inch shell struck amidships. The destroyer broke in two and sank almost instantly, smoke and flame licking the water. Survivors clung to debris, watching the fjord walls reflect fire like mirrors. Other destroyers fared no better. The Z-12 Erich Geese tried to counterattack, firing torpedoes at the advancing battleship, but her weapons were misaligned, and Warspite's maneuvering kept her outside the torpedo arcs. Another salvo, precise and crushing, ripped through the ship's hull, leaving her a burning wreck. The confined fjord amplified the shockwaves, tossing water onto nearby vessels and disrupting any remaining cohesion. Smoke, flame, and the harsh scent of burning oil filled the air. Mountain cliffs reverberated with the sound of heavy shells and splintered timber. Each German destroyer was forced either to fight to the last shell or be scuttled. Several crews abandoned ship, setting demolition charges before leaping into icy water to survive. By late afternoon, Fjord, the innermost anchorage, was littered with wrecks. Stranded destroyers burned along the shore, some partially submerged. Survivors huddled among snowbanks and rocks, waiting for rescue or capture. The fjords themselves were transformed into a graveyard of steel. Warspite remained calm amid the chaos. Her guns, crude with the precision of decades of discipline, continued to fire selectively, suppressing any last bursts of resistance. The British destroyers swept through side fjords, finishing off stragglers and ensuring that no German vessel could slip away. By evening, the gunfire ceased. The fjords were silent. Smoke drifted toward the mountains. Ice-cold water reflected the orange glow of fires on half-sunk hulls. The German destroyer flotilla, once a formidable modern force, was effectively annihilated. The Norwegian coast had witnessed one of the most lopsided naval engagements of the war. One battleship and her screen had destroyed 8 destroyers, not through sheer numbers, but through superior firepower, tactical patience, and ruthless use of geography. As the sun dipped behind snow-capped peaks, Warspite's crew surveyed the scene. There were no celebrations, only the grim acknowledgement of the cost of war, the burden of victory, and the heavy silence left in the wake of fire and steel. The destruction was complete, but the consequences of Narvik's waters rippled far beyond the fjord walls. Counting loss and assessing the battlefield. The fjords of Narvik told the story in steel and fire. 8 German destroyers, Z-21 Wilhelm Heidkamp, Z-22 Anton Schmidt, Z-12 Erich Gies, Z-17 Dieter von Roeder, Z-19 Hermann Kuhn, Z-20 Karl Galster, Z-4 Richard Bateson, and Z-5 Paul Jacobi had been destroyed, scuttled, or abandoned. Several burned along the shores, others rested submerged in icy water. Their crews, scattered across snow-covered mountains and frozen channels, faced capture, injury, or death. British losses were comparatively light. Among the destroyers screening Warspite, minor damage occurred from torpedo near misses, and a handful of sailors were wounded by splintering or gunfire recoil. HMS Warspite herself emerged unscathed, a testament to her armor and the disciplined gunnery that kept the enemy at range. Operationally, the victory was overwhelming. The Kriegsmarine's destroyer strength in Norway had been decimated. 8 of their most modern, fastest ships were now out of action, a loss that would not be remedied quickly. Fuel shortages, geography, and the concentrated British attack had combined to create near-total destruction without requiring the full weight of the Royal Navy's fleet. Reports from the field described the fjords as a graveyard. Mountains reflected the echoes of the guns long after the last shell had fallen. Smoke and fire lingered for hours, visible from miles away, sending a chilling message to German command. The Royal Navy would not hesitate, nor could it easily be deterred by coastal terrain. For the German crews that survived, the aftermath was bitter. Stranded and exhausted, they trudged over snow and rocks to reach Norwegian villages or awaited rescue. Some were captured within days, their ships abandoned behind them. Others awaited neutral or retreating German forces, but the chance to rejoin organized operations was gone. Strategically, the immediate consequences were profound. With the destroyer flotilla neutralized, German naval operations in the far north were severely constrained. Reinforcements from the Atlantic or the Baltic could not reach Narvik unchallenged. Supply lines were disrupted. The momentum Germany had hoped to maintain in Norway slowed to a crawl. Yet the victory carried cautionary notes for the British. The fjords had proven deadly even for the victors. Narrow passages, hidden currents, and the constant threat of torpedoes or shore-based artillery made each step forward perilous. Success required patience, coordination, and a willingness to accept risk, lessons that would shape future operations across the Norwegian theater. Despite the destruction, the broader campaign in Norway remained contested. While the Royal Navy had struck a decisive blow at sea, the German army continued to hold key inland positions, and air support remained a limiting factor for British forces. The naval victory at Narvik was tactical and absolute. The strategic picture, however, was far more complex. Strategic consequences and the broader campaign. In the days following 13 April 1940, the fjords of Narvik settled into an uneasy calm. The physical wreckage was unmistakable. Burning hulks, shattered superstructures, and smoldering decks filled the once bustling harbor. For the surviving German crews, survival was now the primary objective. Many were taken prisoner by Norwegian forces or by British landing parties. Others made perilous treks through snowbound terrain to link up with inland German units. The loss of 8 destroyers represented a catastrophic depletion of the Kriegsmarine's capabilities in northern Norway. These ships had been the backbone of German naval presence in the region, essential for supplying troops, protecting convoys, and threatening Allied shipping. Their elimination allowed the Royal Navy to dominate northern Norwegian waters for the next several weeks, limiting German freedom of movement and threatening inland operations. On the British side, the victory boosted morale. Reports emphasized the efficiency of Warspite and her destroyer screen. Commanders highlighted the decisive use of firepower, coordination, and the careful exploitation of geography. Official dispatches noted that the British achieved in hours what might have taken a full fleet engagement in the open sea. However, the broader campaign in Norway remained unresolved. German ground forces continued to occupy key positions inland, and air superiority over the fjords was contested. While the Royal Navy controlled the waters, logistical and operational challenges prevented an immediate strategic exploitation of the victory. British planners realized that naval dominance, while essential, could not alone secure Norway. The destruction at Narvik also sent a message across Europe. Concentrated, well-led naval operations could neutralize technically formidable forces under the right conditions. Yet, it underscored the inherent risks. A single miscalculation, a premature torpedo hit, or a navigational error in the confined fjords could have turned success into disaster. In summary, the Second Battle of Narvik demonstrated the lethal combination of disciplined leadership, technological superiority, and tactical patience. It achieved a near-total neutralization of the German destroyer flotilla while maintaining British force integrity. At the same time, it foreshadowed the complex interplay of sea, land, and air power that would define the Norwegian campaign and much of the early Second World War in Europe. The fjords fell silent, but the implications of what had just occurred rippled far beyond the mountains and snow. The meaning of Narvik and Warspite's legacy. The waters of Narvik remain quiet today, but the echoes of 13 April 1940 endure in history. HMS Warspite's deliberate, methodical advance through the fjords exemplifies the interplay of technology, leadership, and geography. One battleship, guided by disciplined crews and supported by agile destroyers, reshaped the course of a naval engagement that could have gone in any direction. Narvik teaches a lesson beyond tactical victory. Modern warfare is rarely determined by numbers alone. Firepower, patience, and the ability to exploit terrain or environmental conditions can turn a seemingly desperate situation into absolute control. Warspite did not rely on speed or surprise alone. She relied on precision, preparation, and a relentless approach to opportunity. The human element also resonates. Sailors on both sides faced exhaustion, fear, and the immediate proximity of death. German destroyer crews, trapped by circumstance and geography, demonstrated courage under near-impossible conditions. British sailors, while victorious, bore the psychological weight of orchestrating destruction in confined waters, witnessing fire consume enemy ships, and knowing the high stakes of each decision. Strategically, the battle reinforced the importance of naval dominance in controlling supply lines, influencing broader campaigns, and shaping the theater of war. Yet Narvik also illustrated the limits of naval power, despite this overwhelming success. The Norwegian campaign remained unresolved without coordination with ground and air forces. In the end, the fjords of Narvik stand as a testament to the delicate balance between planning, courage, and circumstance. One battleship's careful advance, one fleet's disciplined engagement, turned trapped waters into a decisive victory. HMS Warspite left the fjords that day not just as a ship of war, but as a symbol of calculated force, the enduring impact of leadership, and the unforgiving reality of naval combat. Victory was clear, but it came at the edge of human endurance, and in that tension, history found both its drama and its lesson.